Hey guys, and welcome to another game review. And today's game review is a very special one because it is actually the first game that I ever played back when I was only 4 years old. Today's game that I will be reviewing is Dungeon Siege. Dungeon Siege was released in 2002 and its platforms have only been PC. And I also want to note that all of the gameplay clips in this video were recorded by me during my playthrough for this review. So without further ado, let's get into the review. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is story. And to be honest, that is probably the worst part of this game because it lacks in almost every way. First of all, at the beginning of the game, you're given a little bit of weak background to how the Kingdom of Ebb was formed. Basically, 300 years ago, there was a great battle, and the Legion, who are, I guess, the kingdom's best fighters, basically left the battle. I think they don't really explain what happened there. They left the battle, probably, and they founded a new kingdom, and the kingdom is called Ebb, and Ebb is where a bunch of people live. So there's peace in Ebb for many, many years, for 300 years. But one day, evil breaks out for some reason that's not really explained, and you, being just a humble, simple farmer, are drug into things because this old guy that, honestly, I don't really know who the old guy is. They never explain it. I mean, is he a friend of yours? Is he your grandpappy? They don't explain it. He's just this old guy. He wanders onto the bridge outside your farm and tells you that the Krug are coming and that you must go to Gjorn in Stonebridge. Okay, why? No clue why. And then he dies. Dies right there in your arms. Real sad. Honestly, didn't care. Because, honestly, no clue who the old guy is. So, you grab the knife you carry in your pocket, and you go on to kill Krug. And find Gjorn. And basically, as the game goes on, you're given basically mission after mission, which will carry you to the very end of the game, where the king's just like, yo man, you gotta save everybody and kill the Sek leader. The Sek are the main villains of the game. You gotta kill their leader. Because, why not? You're the only guy around. So it gives you a key to a fancy-dancy room, and you get a bunch of stuff that you can't even use because at that point in the game you're not going to be a high enough level. And then you go on to kill the main villain and the game just ends. That's it. There's no ending to the game, literally. Whenever you defeat the final boss, the game just goes boop, done. Game over. That's it. The game literally basically crashes at the end. No credits even. That's the end of the story. I just thought that this game's story was like really weak, and there's no explanation of why you, a humble farmer, a humble potato farmer, needs to save the world. Why you? There's no explanation. There's nothing special about you. Actually, there's really nothing known about the main character. There's like no dialogue. Your character literally never talks and never shows any emotion whatsoever. Which I think the idea behind that was that you were basically going to kind of put yourself in the position of the main character. But to me personally, it just made the main character feel like a mindless mercenary with no emotion or honestly no character. The main character had no character. That's pretty sad. And all the other characters I found in the game to be very forgettable, and their dialogue was all like really weak. Really wimpy. The only character that I thought had actually good dialogue was Zed, and he only ever talks once in the game. Right at practically the beginning of the game. That's the only time he ever talks. Everybody else had trashy dialogue though. And all in all, I just found this game's story to be really, really weak. So I'm going to have to give this game for story a score of 2 out of 10. That is an awful score. That is an awful score for story. That is that's a very bad score. Not good. It was just lacking in really every way. So the next thing I want to talk about is graphics. And the graphics in this game I thought were generally very good. All of the textures were fairly high def. I mean, the scenery was all very smooth, the characters were all smooth, all of the monsters were very smooth as well. And quite a few of the creatures I thought looked very good and were very memorable, such as the forest trolls. I thought they looked pretty good. Swamp monsters looked good. All of this game's bosses, for the most part, except for that one purple crystal thing, they all looked good. I thought the final boss was pretty epically designed. Same with the goblin boss, that like mech suit thing, I thought looked very good. The only place this game lost me a little bit for graphics is the fact that the graphics could be a tad bit boring and repetitive, to be honest. All of the forest areas, and there's quite a few forest areas in this game, all of them looked very, very similar to each other. Something else too was a lot of the creatures in the areas were the same color as the scenery, which could cause them to kind of get lost and cause you to not be able to really see the detail in them. And also, I thought graphically the worst area in this game visually would have to be the ice caves. I found the ice caves to be very boring looking. I mean, just everything was ice. Even the creatures were all ice, which caused everything to just look very, very bland. But there were a lot of areas that I thought looked very good, such as the Crypt of the Sacred Blood. That place looked really good. It was the first area in the game, and it really visually sucked you into the game. I would also have to say the Goblin area looked really, really good with all of the pipes and the steam and all of the pathways and stuff. I thought everything there looked really, really quite good. The only thing about this game's graphics really that I didn't like was that they were boring. So I'm going to have to give this game for graphics a score of 8 out of 10. That is a great score for graphics. I really thought this game looked good. It was just a little bit boring. The third thing I want to talk about now is gameplay. And when I'm doing my game reviews, gameplay is the main thing that I take into consideration when coming up with my final scores. And the gameplay in this game, I would have to say, was mechanically very solid. You know, with its, party system where you could build basically a party of up to 8 characters. I thought that was very good. The character classes I thought were pretty solid. You had the melee characters, you had the archers, and then you had combat and nature mages. Though I will say that the combat and nature mages to me felt very, very underpowered. In most games I've played, wizards are usually very powerful characters. Though they may not have the highest armor, they usually have the highest attack. I honestly found these guys just very weak and kind of useless in your team other than the fact that they could heal you. To me, that was their really only purpose, was healing. But I thought other than that, everything was fairly solid mechanically. But there were some problems. I would have to say the main problem would be that this game could get, honestly, at times very boring because it was just so repetitive. I mean, you literally did basically the same thing over and over and over again. And there was no real action to the fights. You basically would just click an enemy and just watch your team fight. It was literally, that was it. You just watch them fight and maybe occasionally click the health button, or if things got really bad, you could run away and then just go right back to the fight. Something else too is this game had a very erratic difficulty curve where, like, at the beginning of the game, first area was like really easy, as it should be, being the first area. But then the second area was like really hard, and then the third area was really easy, and the fourth area was really easy also. And then the fifth area was just stupidly hard, and then the sixth area was just mind-bogglingly hard, and then everything after that felt like really easy for some reason. Something else too I would have to complain about is like endgame. there are a lot of items that you are not going to be able to use, and there's absolutely no way that you could ever use them in this game. I think their plan, honestly, was the endgame stuff in this game you were going to take into multiplayer. You'd be able to use in multiplayer where you would gain more levels and, be able to use them. But sadly, multiplayer on this game without mods does not work anymore. So unless you want to mod your game, you're not going to have multiplayer. So that was a complaint. And something else too I'd have to complain about is the bosses in this game were all just kind of lame. They didn't even feel like bosses. They just felt like normal enemies. Other than, I would have to say, the mechanical goblin boss. That thing was so difficult. I would actually have to say that is one of the hardest bosses in any game I've ever played. Easily. That thing is so hard. And there were also points in this game where it felt like they forgot that they were doing bosses. Because the first area had a boss, and the second area had a boss, but then the third area had no boss, and the fourth area had no boss, but then the fifth area and, the later areas kind of were on and off with the bosses. It's like they just kept forgetting that they were doing bosses, and I thought that was a little bit weird. But I thought that most of the enemies in this game, the normal enemies, were very good, except for a few slightly odd ones, like, this is the stupidest thing, the Googor. I'm not making that up, the Googor. They're little grubs that live in caves, and they're also ninja grubs. It's like they couldn't figure out how a grub would attack you, so they decided, you know what, we're gonna make them do flips and spins to attack you, and honestly, I cannot, every time I've ever played this game, I cannot play this area without chuckling at the Googor, because not only is their name stupid, their attacks are stupid as well. But at least they're memorable, so I have to say that for them. But all in all, this game's gameplay, I just felt like, was really off and on, good and bad. It was kind of an even mix of good and bad, the worst of it being that it was somewhat boring. So I am going to have to give this game for gameplay a score of 6 out of 10. That is a good score. It could have been better, but it is, I would have to say this game's gameplay is good. So there are just 2 more things I want to talk about before I give you all the final score for this game. And the first of those 2 things is difficulty. For the most part, I found this game to be fairly easy. From the beginning, it's easy, then it gets kind of harder, and then really easy again, and then it gets harder, and then easy and harder and easy, and I would have to say, like, the last probably 3 or 4 areas of this game were kind of painfully easy, to be honest. They were, like, no difficulty at all, especially the final boss. Honestly, I tanked that thing. I literally just kind of spammed the health button to drink health potions, and I beat the guy with ease. But there were a couple of areas in the middle of this game that were extremely difficult. And those 2 areas are the swamp and the goblin workshop steam boiler room sort of dungeon thing. First of all, the swamp is extremely difficult, and the hardest part of it, honestly, is there are a lot of creatures there that will try to run away from you. But if you have a second melee character in your party, like I did, he'll just kind of run after them to the ends of the earth, and that gets really, really, really frustrating, and you kind of get to the point when he chases after them of just being like, you know what? Fine. Chase the little trolls. I'm going to disband you from my party so you can go chase the trolls forever. It is pretty irritating. And then the second of those 2 areas, the goblin area, everything there is just unbelievably difficult. I would almost swear that that area was planned to be actually at the end of the game, but they decided to put it in the middle for some reason, but they never lowered the difficulty, because that area was way harder than anything else in the game. So, anyways, I'm going to have to give this game for difficulty a score of 8 out of 10. I found this game to be quite difficult. If I was basing it just off of the goblin area and the swamp, it would have probably been a 10 out of 10 for difficulty, like extreme difficulty. But since the rest of the areas in the game I found to be fairly easy to moderately easy, I'm going to have to give it an 8 for difficulty. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before giving you all the final score for this game is playthrough length. This game was a doozy. This is quite a long game. This game took me, and I didn't do all the side quests in this game, but I will be honest, the side quests won't add much to your playthrough length. But I did kill every single creature. I literally killed every single creature in this game, every enemy. And it took me a total of 22.5 hours to complete this game. To be honest, I wish it had been shorter, or actually split into 2 games maybe it could have been. Like the Goblin area would have been the end of the first game, and then, the end of the game would have been the end of the second, because this game did feel very long and very drug out. Now it is the moment you have all been waiting for. It is time to give this game its final score. And this game's final score is 5.8 out of 10. That is a bad score, I'm sad to say, because this is the first game that I ever played. And though it did get a low score, this game will forever hold a special place in my heart, because it is, well, the first game I ever played. This game was the beginning of me gaming. It's like, this is kind of a special game for me. And I would have to recommend people to play this game, because I will say, your first time playing the game will probably be pretty fun. I've now, though, played this game, like, from start to finish 2 times, but I've also played it not start to finish, just bits and pieces of it, like, probably 30 times I've started playing this game. So, but I would definitely recommend people play this game, just because it was the first game I ever played. So, thanks for watching, and make sure to sub, like, and comment below.